before Zeus threw a single bolt of lightning, before the Olympians existed as a pantheon, before the age of gods that shaped the world you know. There was another age, another king, and a war so catastrophic that the ancient poets could not describe it without their language breaking apart. Hesiod tried. He wrote that the earth crashed loudly, that the sea boiled, that the sky burned from horizon to horizon, that the shaking reached the underworld itself, the place that exists below all other places, and even that was not deep enough to escape what was happening above it. This is not the story of Zeus rising. You already know that story. This is the story of what it actually cost. 10 years. The destruction of everything the world had been. And a king who had seen every terrible thing coming and could not stop a single moment of it. This is the Titanomachy, the war that broke the sky. If you watched season 1, you know how we got here. Cronus took the throne from his father Uranus with a stone sickle and a dark night and the silence of every sibling who watched and said nothing. He ushered in what the myths describe as a golden age. He also swallowed his children whole the moment they were born, because a dying god's curse had told him that a son would one day do to him exactly what he had done to Uranus. His wife Rhea saved the sixth. She hid the pregnancy, gave birth in a cave in the mountains of Crete, and named the child Zeus. When Cronus came for the baby, she handed him a stone wrapped in cloth. He swallowed it without looking. He had done this 5 times already. He was not paying attention. That was his first mistake. It would not be his last. But it was the one that made all the others possible. Zeus grew up, came back, poisoned his father with emetic herbs, and 5 fully grown gods came back into the world furious. Cronus looked at his children standing in front of him and understood something he had spent an entire age trying not to understand. The prophecy had not been delayed. It had been building. Every careful measure he had taken to prevent this moment had been the foundation the moment was standing on. He rallied his titans on Mount Othrys to the south. Zeus claimed Mount Olympus to the north, and the Thessalian plain between them, 5,000 square miles of the most fertile ground in Greece, became the battlefield where the first divine world would end. The Titans were not a disorganized force. They were the original gods, the first divine generation, with commanders who had never lost a war because before this moment there had never been a war. Atlas led the Titan armies in the field, patient, methodical. He had looked at the Olympians across the plain and made a calculation. Youth and anger burn fast. Time and experience win wars. He was right about almost everything. He was wrong about one thing. His name was Prometheus, and his name meant foresight. He had gone to Cronus first and told him plainly, "This war cannot be won through force alone. We need strategy." Cronus dismissed him. So Prometheus walked across the plain to Zeus, and he brought something more valuable than any weapon. He brought the Titan battle plans. He brought intelligence. The goddess Themis followed. Then Styx came to Olympus with her children, Nike, Kratos, Zalus, and Baia. Victory, strength, zeal, and force bound to Zeus permanently. Cronus had the experience of an age. Zeus now had the people who had thought hardest about what winning would actually require. For 9 years the war ground on. 9 years of divine bodies, each one the mass and force of a geological event, slamming into each other across the Thessalian plain. 9 years of the earth splitting and the sea being thrown against the sky. Neither side broke. The Titans held through discipline and experience. Every time Zeus pushed, Atlas adjusted. Every weakness the Olympians found closed before they could break through. Cronus watched from Othrys and felt something he had not felt since the night Uranus screamed the curse into the sky. Not fear. Not yet. Something colder. The slow recognition that the thing he had always known was coming was not going to arrive suddenly. It was going to arrive year by year, taking everything with it. 9 years in, Zeus received a prophecy from Gaia herself, his grandmother, the earth goddess who had put the sickle in Cronus' hand and engineered the overthrow of divine kings across 3 generations. She told him the truth no one else would say. The Olympians could not win this war from above. The thing that would win the war was underground. It had been underground since before Cronus took the throne, and it was time to go and get it. Tartarus is not simply the underworld. The underworld is where the dead go. Tartarus is where creation put what it could not look at. The ancient poets said a bronze anvil dropped from the surface of the earth would fall for 9 days and 9 nights before reaching the floor. It predates the gods. It predates the Titans. It was there before the first divine being drew breath, and Cronus had used it as a disposal mechanism for anything that frightened him. The Cyclops were in there. Brontes, Steropes, Arges, Thunder, Lightning, Bright. Master craftsmen of impossible skill, the greatest artificers in the cosmos, imprisoned since before the age of Cronus with nothing to work on and the knowledge of everything they could build growing more precise and more elaborate with every century in the dark. When Zeus broke their chains, they did not run. They looked at him and asked one question: "What do you need?" For Zeus they forged the Thunderbolt, not a weapon, a force of nature given a shape that could be held and thrown. Pure destructive energy in physical form. Hesiod writes that when Zeus first threw it, the ocean steamed, the earth melted at the edges, and the sky itself caught fire. For Poseidon they forged the trident, 3 tines of divine metal that could split the seafloor along any line the god chose. Drive it into the earth and the coast reshapes itself. The weapon that could redraw geography. For Hades, something that does not announce itself, the helm of darkness, not invisibility, erasure. The god of the dead, already the most feared presence in the cosmos, could now move through a battlefield and leave no trace except the consequences. 3 weapons, 3 brothers. The Cyclops had spent an age in darkness designing them. They took perhaps an hour to build. The Cyclops were not the only thing Cronus had sealed in the dark. The Hecatoncheires were deeper. Briareus, Cottus, Gaius, each with 50 heads, each with 100 arms, each arm capable of lifting a boulder the size of a building. When Cronus first looked at them before he threw them into Tartarus, he felt something he had never felt before or since. He felt small. He had been right to be afraid. He had simply been wrong about what to do with that fear. Imprisoning what you fear does not make you safer. It gives what you fear time to think about what it will do when it gets out. Gaia spoke to them in the dark. She told them who had imprisoned them and who had freed them. She asked them to fight. They had been in Tartarus for the entire age of Cronus, with nothing but the memory of the king who decided they were too dangerous to exist in his world. They considered what they were being asked. They said yes. Zeus gave them ambrosia and nectar before they ascended, food of the gods, the first they had ever tasted. It was not a bribe, it was an acknowledgement. These beings had been owed something for an age. The least the cosmos could do was feed them before asking them to fight. What happened on the Thessalian plain in the 10th year is described in Hesiod's Theogony in language that does not try to be poetic. It simply tries to be accurate, and accuracy requires language that sounds like the end of the world. Because that is exactly what it was. Zeus came off Olympus with the Thunderbolt and threw it into the Titan line. The mountain behind the Titan position cracked down the middle, not fractured, split. He threw it again. The plane lit up white. He kept throwing. Hesiod records that the heat was so extreme that the ocean steamed, the earth liquefied at the edges, and the air above the plain caught fire as if someone had set fire to the atmosphere itself. Poseidon drove the trident into the seafloor off the coast. The sea pulled back and came forward. Titan supply lines that had fed the Othrys position for 9 years were swallowed. The earth fractured under the Titan fortifications. Hades put on the helm of darkness and walked into the enemy camp unseen. Weapons vanished. Provisions disappeared. The command structure Atlas had maintained for 9 years began to lose coherence, not from any battle the Titans could identify, but from something moving through them they could neither see nor stop. Atlas held the line, the finest field commander in the history of warfare, holding position against a thunderbolt that was remaking the landscape and a god that could not be perceived. He held it for the entire morning of the last day. Then the Hecatoncheires began to throw. 300 boulders, simultaneously. Each Hecatoncheire carried 100 arms, and each arm threw at the same moment, all 3 of them together, and the sky above the Titan position went dark with stone. Not a metaphor. The ancient poets are describing the literal darkening of the sky as 300 house-sized boulders blocked out the light. The Titan army looked up and saw the sky disappear. Hesiod runs out of individual comparisons and starts stacking them. The crash of the sea, an earthquake, a storm, all at once. No single natural disaster is adequate. He needs all of them simultaneously. The Titan line broke. Atlas stood in the collapse and watched the army he had commanded for 10 years dissolve around him like water around stone. There was nothing in the experience or courage of any being in existence that had prepared them for what 300 simultaneous house-sized boulders looked like from below. They ran. They did not get far. The Titans were cast into Tartarus, the same darkness Cronus had used to dispose of everything that frightened him. The Hecatoncheires were stationed at the gates as permanent guards. The 3 beings Cronus had feared enough to imprison before his own children would now stand watch over his prison for eternity. Every day in the dark, he would know exactly what was outside and why. Atlas received a personal sentence, not Tartarus. He was condemned to stand at the western edge of the world and hold the celestial heavens on his shoulders forever. Not the earth, the sky, the weight of the upper cosmos pressing down on a single body with no relief, no end, no possibility of release. The field general, who had commanded with more skill and discipline than any being had ever demonstrated in any war, would spend eternity bearing the weight of the thing he had spent 10 years trying to tear down. Then Zeus did something almost never mentioned in the retellings. He went to find his father. Cronus looked at his son from the dark. He was the god who had heard the prophecy and spent an entire reign trying to make it untrue. He had swallowed his children, imprisoned the craftsmen, sealed the Hecatoncheires in the deepest place in existence. He had built an entire architecture of preemptive violence around the single possibility he could not accept, and it had happened anyway. Every measure he had taken had become the mechanism of his own defeat. The swallowed gods came out furious. The imprisoned craftsmen built the weapons. The beings he feared most threw the boulders that broke his army. The prophecy of Uranus had not been a curse. It had been a description. This was always what was going to happen. The only variable was the cost. Zeus looked at his father in the dark and understood something that would sit with him for the rest of his existence. The curse did not stop here. Somewhere in the future he could not yet see, a child of his would stand in front of him with this same expression, the same weight. He turned and went back to the surface. The door to Tartarus closed behind him. And in the dark, for the first time in 10 years, there was silence. The universe was divided 3 ways. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, Hades took the underworld. The earth was held in common. No single god owned the ground that everything else stood on. Zeus had done everything right. He had freed the imprisoned craftsman. He had listened to the god who brought intelligence instead of brute force. He had waited 9 years for the weapons that ended the war in an afternoon. He had matched every punishment to the crime it was answering. He had built a cosmic order more structurally sound than anything that had existed before it. And he stood on the highest mountain in the world with the lightning in his hand, and the sky repaired above him, and his father sealed in the dark below, and he felt something that no victory had ever been large enough to prevent. The weight of what he now knew. Cronus had swallowed his children because of a prophecy. Uranus had imprisoned his because of fear. Every king in the history of the Greek cosmos had received the same warning, made the same calculation, built the same architecture of violence around the same impossibility. Your children will destroy you. The cycle had not ended. It had consumed Uranus and it had consumed Cronus, and now it had a new king to work with. The new king was standing on a mountain in the sky with every reason to believe he had won, and every reason to know that winning was not the same as escaping. The war was over, the curse was not. Cronus built his entire reign around preventing one thing. Every child he swallowed, every craftsman he imprisoned, every terrifying being he sealed in the dark, all of it was designed to stop the prophecy. But the swallowed gods came back furious. The imprisoned craftsman built the weapons that ended him. The beings he feared most threw the boulders that broke his army. He constructed the war that destroyed him out of the materials of his own fear. Is that a tragedy? Or is it something more uncomfortable? A warning that the thing you are most afraid of becoming is exactly what your fear will make you. Next time on Gods and Empires, we travel north, before Odin became the All-Father, before Asgard had walls or weapons or the wisdom that defines it. 2 divine civilizations went to war and neither won. The Aesir, gods of battle and order. The Vanir, masters of nature and a magic so powerful it could bend reality without lifting a weapon. They fought until the cosmos itself began to fail. And the peace they built from the wreckage created something that had never existed before in any mythology. A god made from the combined essence of 2 pantheons who had just tried to destroy each other. The first war in the Norse cosmos is waiting.